Hi. Hi, this is Drew Tignanelli. This is our May 2025 update
Yeah,
here with Michael P.
happy to
Michael,
be
how are
here as
you today?
always. So we can go ahead. We'll knock out a little housekeeping right up here at the front. Just want to, probably every month, just remind people about Flourish. If you have money in a bank that's barely earning interest, or even if you have friends that might benefit from it, you can certainly let us know, and we can refer them to that Flourish product. That's still paying 4%, I believe, right, True?
Yes, it's FDIC insured, pays 4%, and it insures the account for $5 million single and $10 million married because they're a bank aggregator. They take lots of banks and they divvy your money out to them to keep you insured and negotiate the highest rate they can.
And we don't get
4%.
anything from it. There's no fee coming to us for it. It's just one of those things where we're looking out for the best interest of our clients and want to let people know about what we think is probably the best savings account out there. So, a note on that. We try to keep our articles and webinars timely to what people are thinking about. And this month, the article is Staying the Course, Smart Financial Planning Strategies in the Down Market. And, Drew and I know that when the markets are, up and down, or especially when they're down, it gets concerning. It's stressful for people. So in this article, we'll kind of talk through the psychology of that a little bit. We
Yeah, that
also
was by
have,
Maddie. That was a great article.
yep, by Maddie, who is, what's her designation for financial therapy?
Certified financial therapist.
Yep, yep. So great content from her. And then for the webinar, it's going to be a case study. I have $2 million saved. Am I still on track to retire? So that should be interesting as well. I'm not sure if Alex is doing that or somebody else. Alec is doing that or somebody else is doing that.
I'm not.
Okay, well, it's not you. But Drew, U.S. equity markets, they've been making some fairly, significant up and down moves. Unfortunately, right now, moving kind of downward. But what are your thoughts?
Actually, the last couple days, today and yesterday, they've moved up almost 5% in 2 days.
Yeah,
So markets go up, markets go down. That's how they work. If they didn't work like that, they wouldn't work.
yep, absolutely.
That's a great statement. Remember that, Mike. If they didn't work like that, they
It
wouldn't
wouldn't
work.
work.
You know,
We'll put it on a t-shirt.
put it on a t-shirt. Every day the market's a voting machine. People get upset about something and they drive the markets lower, or they get, some good news and they drive the markets higher. And they think that that's the way you're supposed to trade markets, try to get in at the bottom and out at the top. That's not how markets work
Right.
because every day they're a voting machine. Over the long term, they're a weighing machine. And as long as you see the United States as a free market that's relatively strong companies, et cetera, and the largest economy in the world, you just have to assume that for now, they're going to be worth something more 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
And we've got to really clarify because when we're talking about the markets that have been down or particularly volatile, although it's mostly the U.S. equity market, international markets have actually done quite well for the year.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, we caught a lot of flack from people over the last 10 years because the US market was doing so well. They kept asking us, why do we own any international securities? And the answer is because you go through these periods where the US outperforms and then the internationals outperform. It's happened in my 40-year career, at least two times you've seen a shift. US, international, US, international. I've been, and they normally take, 5 to 10 years for the shifts to take place. So it seems as if in the last year or so, you're starting to get that resurgence to the internationals and the US start to level out for a while. That doesn't mean the US won't do something. It just probably, and we don't know for sure, it probably won't be the predominant market for the next 5 years, let's call it. But that's why diversification is important. And because we're Americans, we keep most of our assets in America. We don't diversify overtly into the international if we think they're undervalued. We just keep a reasonable amount internationally.
so
Anyway,
we talk about market news and economics news. You can't not at least mention the tariffs. Give us your thoughts.
Well, tariffs have a place. There's no doubt about that. I don't necessarily know if they have a place in this yo-yo. You have no idea what you're talking about day to day. But unless a country and your country have absolute equal corporate tax rates and absolutely no subsidies to their corporations, et cetera, et cetera. You can have a completely free trade market, but that's never going to happen. Europe's going to have different tax rates than we're going to have. Europe's going to
Politicians want
subsidize.
to control things.
They want to, and they always have their reasons as to why it's beneficial and so forth. Tariffs give you some level of saying to your companies, look, I'm going to give you an advantage, 10%, 20%, maybe at the max. And if you can't make ends meet with that kind of an advantage against your foreign competitors, I don't care what their countries are doing for you, you probably don't deserve to be competing. So tariffs have a place in certain things at certain times with certain countries. And you also have to keep in mind that we have been treated much more harshly by other countries, especially poorer countries, because they feel that the US would just absolutely dominate them. And I don't disagree with that. But if their companies can't compete with the US country, with a US company with a 20, 30% bogey on them, they shouldn't compete with the US companies at all. But, again, we get back to the point that President Trump has a unique way of doing things. I don't necessarily agree with him in any way, shape, or form, Mike, but tariffs have a place. I just wish they were more professionally talked about and so forth.
Yeah. Well, in other news, the question I probably get asked most by younger generations, not the young generations, but the ones buying houses and cars, is what's going to go on with interest rates. And Federal Reserve has a meeting set with an announcement set for May 7th. We don't know what they're going to do, but the market's got a voting machine. They've got a predicting machine, right?
And there's ways of looking at how interest rates are trading to bet as to what the Federal Reserve is going to do. And right now they're sitting at 50-50 chance that Powell will cut in May. You have had good inflation news actually, to some degree, and you've also had commodity markets collapse in many ways also. There's reason I'm a firm believer that Powell's wrong in keeping rates at the level that he's kept them, because inflation is two-sided. It's not only the demand side, which Powell controls by keeping rates higher, but it's also the supply side. And the supply side will be benefited by dropping rates and allowing companies to build more houses, to do more manufacturing, to expand their facilities, and so forth. And he's had a tight rein on money for 2.5 years now.
Yeah, the
He
housing
was,
market's incredibly affected because so many people don't move that would move because they don't want to change their interest rates, and people
yeah,
would love to buy but don't, or they do and they really don't have much money to spend elsewhere in the economy because of the interest rates. But
yeah. Well,
that is what it
hopefully,
is.
hopefully he'll come around to understanding how economics work, even though he's supposedly. Anyway, that's another story.
So
Let's
May is
go.
a very special month. Among others, I have my birthday in May, and this is a big one for me. I'm turning 40 years old. I've
Yeah.
given a lot of interesting compliments recently. One of our employees said, I can't believe you're just now turning 40 years old. You seem like you're much older than that. And she said, but I mean that in a good way. And I took it. Um,
They followed up with that, you
yeah,
know.
they followed up.
Um,
But yes, I'm turning 40, and I thought as a planning topic, while maybe a number of our clients won't benefit from this, this might be something that's beneficial to send to their younger children. Not little children, but they're people in their 20s, 30s, and approaching their 40s. And it's what are the things that you should accomplish or try to accomplish by the time you're 40?
yeah. Go ahead, tell us. You're the one that just turned 40. I can't remember when I turned 40 what I should have done.
I haven't turned yet. Not next month, maybe by the time this video comes out.
May 6th, right?
May 6th, yeah. So goals for kids under 40. The first one, and I did put these in kind of a priority order. Eliminate all debt but the mortgage. If you have to have a car payment to get to work, okay, but That should be your top goal, is get rid of the car payment. Debt is just a huge drag. Many call it a tax on the poor. And I've really seen that where, people get really convinced into putting things in debt, and, just the amount of money that they spend on interest, is incredible. The second thing is your protection, your interest or insurance policy against debt in the future, which is to form an emergency fund. A lot of people will say 3 to 6 months of expenses is a good number. And as we talked about at the opening of the show, Flourish is a great place for an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months.
Well, before you go on though, let me just, what the average person's going to say to you, Mike, is, yeah, you got to make a lot of money to be able to do all that because it's just too expensive to live and so forth. And the answer to that is that no, your expenditures are too high for your income. We don't have to spend everything we do. We psychologically believe that everything we buy is a necessity. Going
Yeah.
on that super nice vacation because you deserve a break. I remember when I was a kid, we lived in 1,000 square foot house. We had one car, and four kids piled into a 57 Chevy, and we went for, a week to our in-laws, I mean, to our relatives in Pittsburgh. That was vacation, Mike.
Hmm.
It didn't cost us hardly anything.
Yeah. And I mean, there's certainly exceptions to that. There's people with disabilities, but if you're a healthy working adult, these are things you can accomplish. Actually, so my next priority is retirement, because there's going to come a time when maybe you can't work. Maybe it's not up to you with how much more you work, and you got to prepare for that. My best tip that I did myself, I've been working for Mr. Tignanelli here since I graduated college and before that.
I
And
thought I
every
worked for
time,
you.
would you say?
I thought I worked for you.
But that's the way it works now. But every time Drew was generous and gave me a raise, I made sure that I didn't let myself have it all until was filling up all those buckets. And that was the easiest way to do it, because you really don't feel the loss of money you've never gotten into your bank account.
Somebody once said to me, one of the wisest things I learned when I graduated college, he said, be careful. Your expenditures are going to keep up with your income, you
Yep.
know? And so I worked hard at making sure that whatever my income it was, I was 30% or so below that in my expenditures. I tried to do what I could to not let my expenditures keep up with my income.
So when we talk about, this, younger person, younger generation saving for retirement, there's some things we need to think about. The biggest one is your tax rate now versus your tax rate in the future. If you're optimistic and feel like as you progress through your career, you'll make more and more money and you'll be at higher tax rates. Well, in the early beginning, man, that Roth makes a ton of sense. Once you get to a certain, very nice high income level, it flips, because there's the way the tax code works. Right around $400,000, you switch it to the other side. But for most people, they should be putting it in the Roth. Uh, and the next thing is, if you have kids, and you can debate with me on this if you think this is the next one or this should be the one after it. But if you have kids, you should have life insurance. There's many ways to get it. There's some ways that are easier than other. You definitely need to shop it. Don't go to your friend Larry who, just got his insurance license. Move it around, look at different options for policies, group policies at work.
It should be, never use group life, never use group life. It should be a personal 20-year term policy. Don't take your term beyond 20, and it should be a term policy. Don't do just 10 either. It should be 20. And you should gear it toward each child. If you have 3 kids, you should think about increasing some of your insurance with a new 20-year policy.
Yep, absolutely.
Term insurance.
Term
Don't
insurance,
get
no goal insurance.
lured into anything else.
And then
What's
the next big, would you say, Drew?
what's your next one?
Next one is owning a home. It's sometimes it's a great forced savings method. Sometimes when people, if they're not as successful, they get to the end of their life, that house is their main asset to to try to do anything with. So it's great to own a home. It's even better when interest rates are lower. So hopefully we'll see that soon. And then the next thing, especially as you approach having kids, and especially getting to 40 where maybe you have saved some assets, making sure you have a good estate plan.
You
And
have children, you have to have an estate
should
plan
have it as soon,
because
that's
God forbid
your,
something's happened to both the mother and the father. You could have a mess on your hands. Your kids could end up in foster home, believe it or not, if there's a fight between the family as to who would take care of the kids. One piece of paper saying, this is who I choose, eliminates that whole thing. So that's that simple, Mike.
and the last item I have on my list, because we've got one more topic that's important, is if you've done everything else, not alongside, but if you've done everything else, or you're be able to do everything else, considering a 529 plan for your kids can be a really great idea. But you should always remember you need to make sure you've saved enough for your life. They're going to have the opportunity to work, and save in the future. But if you have the extra, the 529 can be a great investment.
That's the college savings plan.
College savings plan. So that was
Yeah,
just a
so
quick overview of some accomplishments that you can hopefully try to get your younger people to by the time they're 40.
yeah, and now because our firm's mainly in Maryland, we just got a big Maryland tax law change.
Oh yeah. We call it the Maryland relocation plan.
Well, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Believe it, as bad as it is, it's not as bad as it could have been. So 6% sales tax on vending machine purchases. I guess there are a lot of Marylanders who are spending a lot of money in them vending machines, Mike, you know. But the big one in the sales tax is 3% sales tax on tech services. That's going to clobber us. We're going to have to put
Business,
up a
yeah.
fair amount of money to pay the sales tax to the state of Maryland for something that we do to protect our clients, is good tech,
Yeah.
protects our
It's our
clients.
second most expensive cost. First one's
Yeah.
labor, and the second one's the tech.
And now they're going to take a big hunk extra away from us that we can't spend even more on tech to continue to protect our clients. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that just infuriates you with government. They don't understand, it seems like. They don't
Yeah.
care, is what it is.
So there's an increase in taxes on cannabis and sports betting. You see this kind of trend, vending machines, cannabis, sports betting, who are we taxing? There was no estate tax change. So I know a lot of people were worried about that. That stayed the same. If your income is over 350,000, you're going to have a new 2% additional capital gains tax for the state. And then the biggest one is the marginal tax brackets. For lower income people, this is not going to be as important, but higher income people spend a lot of money in the state, and you don't really want to push them out. So they're raising it by 0.5% on income over 500,000, married filing joint. And
I
they're
think that's anybody, not just married filing joint. That's both brackets, married filing joint and single.
well, no, they're condensing the bottom three brackets for the same amount that's whatever the under 3,000 is, and then it goes to 5.75 from 5.75 to 6.25 on income over 500,000 married filing joint.
And then
And
six
then
1/2%.
they're raising it to 6.5% for income over $1 million. So, I mean, a lot of people say, hey, that's not me, it's not my problem. But, some of those people are the people buying cars and going to expensive restaurants and feeding the economy.
And then they're going to let some cities and counties raise their piggyback tax from 3.2% to 3.3%.
Yep. I love Hartford County, but they like those piggyback taxes.
But I want to just go back to that capital gains tax one. You say it's 2% if you have over 350,000. The interesting thing about that one, Mike, is that Maryland taxes capital gains at the same rate as all other income. So what it's saying is if you have a capital gain that we're already taxing at 8.5% or whatever, we're going to tax it now at 10.5% if your income's over 350,000.
If your capital gain income is over 350.
I thought it was just the capital gains income. You're saying if you have a capital gain over 350,000, you'll pay another 2%. It's always hard to understand.
Yep.
exactly what they're trying to say.
I've spent an hour and a half putting that together,
There you go.
trying to make sure I phrased it correctly.
Yeah, well, but it's crazy because you're already paying the regular Maryland income tax rate on it. Why should you have to pay? And the average guy, the average person could sell a house that they bought years ago and make a capital gain of 300,000 or 400,000, and next
Yeah.
thing you know, they've got to pay 2% more for why?
Yeah.
Because
All
they
business.
think that's the way of hitting the rich guy or something.
Yeah. And then the last one I have written down here is they are increasing the standard deduction 20%. So that'll help a lot of people in the lower income brackets.
20%.
Something. Hey, they had to be able to say they didn't just increase taxes. They had to find somewhere where they could give a little break. But the big thing, this is going to hit a lot of people. They're limiting itemized deductions for people earning more than $200,000 a year, single and married filing joint, with a 7.5% phase out factor.
7.5% per thousand per.
I'll be honest, I'm wishing I had wrote myself another note there.
Yeah, I saw that and I was trying to think what was it. I remember reading something about it. But basically what's going to happen is that if you have a lot of itemized deductions and your income's over, say 300,000, it's probably every 100,000 you're going to lose 7,500.
Yeah,
That's pretty much what I think they're saying.
yeah.
And that is going to impact a lot of people. But
Plenty of people have a lot of mortgage interest and they're charitable, and then they're 10,000 for their state tax. Oh, well, I guess it doesn't happen on that side. So.
yeah, well, I don't understand this the concept of raising taxes, taxes, taxes. They act as if they never get any tax revenue in, and cutting spending is never an option. It seems like.
Nope, nope, we don't want to do that. We just want to spend more.
We're not going to do that. And here's the thing that you really have to be worried about, Mike, is when they throw these things around and say, "Oh, it's only for people with 350,000 or more. It's only people with 500,000. It's only people with 1 million or more." Sooner or later, it becomes 200,000, and it becomes 100,000, and it becomes 50,000, and then it's everyone.
Right. Yep. Trickle
That's
down
a
economics kind of.
that's one of the great lessons of taxation, income taxation. The federal government passed a constitutional amendment to the country. 36 states had to ratify it. And they did because they convinced them that 1% on 400,000 back in those days, inflation adjusted to today, it would be 1% on 400,000. Does that sound similar to the rhetoric that's thrown around today? It seems like it's been going around for 200 years now. So 1% on 400,000. Well, World War I ended 5 years later. Guess what? It was 10% on inflation adjusted $40,000 because, well, gosh, we just had the war and we spent all that money. We now have to raise taxes on everyone to get that. And I mean, if
Yep.
that isn't a lesson to everyone, the estate tax was only 60 families in the country would ever pay the estate tax when it was brought forth in the 1930s. Today, millions of families could pay the estate tax. The alternative minimum tax, 1969, 69 families qualified to pay the alternative minimum tax. And in 2002, 21 million households paid the alternative minimum tax. This year, it's probably going to be only a couple million, but that's a significant number. Anytime they tell you the tax is on the rich, 3, 4, 5 years from now, trust me, you're going to be rich.
Yep.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
you're out of time. I'm still having a good time, but you're out of time. So this is Drew Tignanelli saying God bless.